So, as you know from the last session, I'm a professor of English and the humanities, and most of my courses that I teach are in literature. However, I do teach writing as well. And in my writing classes, I teach students academic composition, but I also always try to include at least a week or two of professional writing. And so I work carefully with the Career Center at my institution to prepare these materials for these students. And so, I mean, part of what they do as well is after I give this workshop, they all sign up for LinkedIn, they all learn how to use LinkedIn, and they all create an e-portfolio and everything. So this is part of that larger sort of sequence. But anyway, so I'm going to begin here, and so let's see. The first thing that I wanted to ask you, I'm just going to open this up to everybody. What is a resume? Can anyone give me just sort of a one-sentence definition of what a resume is? How many of you already have a resume, by the way? Okay. All right, so what is a resume? Okay, so, sorry, it's a one-page? A one-page document that sells you to your employer, or a history, right? A personal history, okay? A work history. All of these are exactly what a resume is, right? Most resumes, yes, they do tend to be one page, okay? This depends on your field. Some things like curriculum vitae, they can be as many as 20 pages, right? But a typical resume is one page. And it is a history, a document of your employment, right? Your employment and any other skill that could make you a really, really strong candidate for the job that you are applying for, right? It's a summary of your education, your experience, your job skills, your qualifications. Does anybody know how long a human resource manager typically takes to read your resume the first time it goes through? How many of you guys say about 5 minutes? How about 1 minute? Seconds? Okay, good job. Good job, everybody. Yeah, a typical recruiter will scan over your resume in seconds, okay, before deciding whether or not they want to keep you and send you up to the next level. That's seconds, okay? One page, you have to make an impact, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what you need to do before you even start writing your resume, because as you can see, it's incredibly important, but it's incredibly concise. And it's important that you choose every word, every element super carefully so that it's able to showcase your best possible self to your employer, okay? So here's five steps in creating a resume. The first thing is that you want to analyze yourself. Okay? And you don't have to get super self-critical or think about everything in your life, but all you need to do is really sit down and think about and write down everything that you've done in your life, okay, that could possibly relate to a job. All right? So this includes the schools that you've been to, possibly if you're in college, the major that you're currently majoring in, all the different jobs that you've done, and what you've done at those jobs, right? That you can talk about, right? All the volunteer work, your leadership experience, all that stuff. Don't leave anything out, right? Even that babysitting job that you did in 7th grade, that might somehow work into a career in education. You never know, right? So you want to really think about and analyze everything that you've done, right, in your life, okay? And what I've done is on the second page of your handout, I'm not going to go over it until a little bit later, but I've given you guys a pre-writing resume questionnaire, and this is what you do in that step when you're analyzing yourself. Just sit down and write down, answer all these questions, right? And you might need more space to do that, that's totally fine. But really, it's kind of like when you're writing a draft before you turn in an essay, right? You really want to draft everything that could possibly go into your resume in that questionnaire. Okay, so number 2, after you analyze yourself, right, I need you to analyze the job description, okay? So when you are looking for jobs, typically, you know, sometimes you'll get it through networking or whatnot, but a lot of times you'll find a job description, a job for the job online, right, or in the newspaper, or whatever the case may be. You really, really want to read that description for the job very carefully, okay? Because what you're going to do is, A, you want to see whether you're even qualified to apply for that job, right? But the second thing, too, is if you decide that you are qualified, then you need to make sure that your job materials, including your resume and possibly a cover letter, reflect in the language what that job requires, okay? So if they say they need someone with people skills, you want to make sure that your resume also shows that you have people skills, right, etc. You guys know what I'm talking about. If a job says that they require minimum 2 to 5 years of experience in sales or marketing, you should not apply, or you should really think seriously about applying if you've only got 6 months, okay? Because there's going to be plenty of people with 7 years of experience applying for that job, right? So that's why it's really, really important to carefully read the language of the job description, okay? So that's number 2. Number 3, once you start working on your resume, you want to make sure that you know the conventions of the language, right, that's typically used on a resume. It's not like ordinary language, okay? It's not the conversational language you do when you're talking to somebody, right, or even in an email. There's very specific kinds of resume language. Usually, you're going to be using a lot of powerful verbs, action verbs, right, to describe what you've done at jobs and things like that, okay? So you want to make sure that you talk about your accomplishments in the most vivid, right, and really exciting and, exciting language as possible to make you stand out from other possible candidates, okay? Number 4, I can't emphasize this enough, okay? Your content on your resume is absolutely important, yes, but it also has to look good, okay? So I always tell my students, and this goes with number 5, make sure that you have your resume materials critiqued by a lot of other people, okay? So that they can catch for typos, right, misspellings, grammatical errors, anything like that. Also, formatting is very important. To go back to our initial answer, right, a resume should really not be longer than a page, really. And, if you're going to be bullet pointing every job that you've had, you want to make sure that every job has the same exact size bullet point, right, that's tabbed once, not twice, right, etc., right? It should be very, very clean, concise, good-looking formatting, okay? Because, again, you have to remember, the recruiter is going to take a few seconds to scan through your resume and see whether they like it or not. And I've definitely heard from people that if you even have a typo, sometimes a resume can get thrown out for something as, as tiny as that. Okay. So, and then number 5, obviously, have your resume critiqued. I always tell my students they should have at least 3 people read it, including a professor that they trust, someone in the field that they're going into, a friend or a writing tutor, or whatever the case may be. But it's really, really important that you have your resume critiqued by other people. When I was applying for teaching jobs, I actually had a committee assembled specifically to go over my resume and cover letter for about 6 months. I went through over 20 versions of my resume, because each time somebody would find something else that they didn't like and they would give it back to me and I would have to redo it, and then I had to send it through committee. You're probably not going to have to do it that many times, but just think about it. Other people out there applying for the same job that you are, they might be having their resume critiqued by professionals, right? So you want to make sure that you try your best to be on a level playing field with the person who is doing the most work with their resume. And hopefully that's you, but you never know. Are we all good with this? Okay. All right, so moving on. All right, so I'm going to go over a couple brief things here. Obviously, content to include in your resume. Some of these are required, others not so much, right? You want to cut and paste and pick and choose what's most relevant for your own personal experiences, right? Your own personal history. Obviously, you need to have your name, your contact information, etc. Sometimes you might want to put in your objective. I know some industries don't require an objective, which is basically a sentence that says what you want to achieve at that job, right, or why you're applying for that job. But if you do require that, right, make sure you've got that in there. You want to talk about your education, okay, so college degree, your high school that you went to. Do you guys think that maybe middle school is important to put in, junior high? Probably not, okay. High school, yes, right? Because a lot of jobs do require at least a high school diploma, right? So you do want to say that you've graduated, so that's good. Work experience, obviously, you want to make sure that you write down everything that you've done and everything that you've done at those jobs, if they're relevant. Leadership, volunteer activities, right? Community service, that looks really, really good on your resume. I mean, besides the fact that it's good that you're doing that anyway, it also, it's a good thing to put on your resume as well. Any honors and awards that you've received, okay? And then anything else that you think might be, something that helps make you stand out from the crowd, right? Professional affiliations, right? National Honor Society, military experience, right? I have a lot of students who return from the military who are applying for jobs. I always tell them to put that stuff in there. Any sort of skills that you have, right? Computer skills, don't underestimate, right? Your computer skills, because you may be competing with people who are much, much older who don't know how to use PowerPoint, right? But you want to make sure that you show that you have facility with these programs. And then finally, interests, right? Languages that you know, right? Have you done some travel, right? There's room for that if it's relevant for your job, okay? So the next thing I'm going to talk about is just as important, which is what not to include in your resume, okay? So first of all, please don't put a photo of yourself in there. Just don't, okay? Unless you're applying for an acting job or a modeling job, something that requires that, just don't even do that. You have no idea what sort of stereotypes you're exposing yourself to, right, by putting your image in there. Just don't do it, okay? Number two, this may come up in interviews, but it's something that you do not have to supply in your actual resume. You don't have to write down any reason why you left a previous employer, okay? Number three, I put this up there because I've seen, people have given me resumes with their social security number on there, or their driver's license, or IDs. I hope I don't have to tell you that. Don't put that on your information, okay? Do not supply that on your resume, please. Okay? Salary history, same thing. Physical characteristics, your height and weight, right? None of their business. Health issues, none of their business. Unless, again, it's relevant, like, certain professions do require, like a lifeguard, right? Might require you to talk a little bit about your physique, but, aside from that, don't voluntarily supply that. And then the last line right there refers to things that are actually illegal. As far as I know, right? They're actually illegal for employers to ask you at any point in the job search process, okay? You do not supply information about your race, ethnicity, whether or not you're a U.S. citizen, right? Your age, your religion, marital status, right, etc. And in fact, in your folders, there should be another sheet of paper written by one of our esteemed lawyers, Jane Park. She puts together a list of interview questions that are actually illegal for employers to ask you during any part of the job search process. So thank you, Jane. So all these interview questions, just educate yourself, okay? Don't supply it voluntarily, and you don't need to supply it when asked, okay? All right, so let's see. Okay, so in your handout, right? Again, we don't have time to go through this right now, but on your own, when you are starting to put together your resume and job materials, I've included, as I mentioned before, this pre-writing resume questionnaire so that you can go through this on your own, fill it out, and just collect as much information about yourself, your professional self, as possible before you start writing your resume. You don't want to start writing it cold, okay? Just like drafting. So the stuff that I put down here is number one, your contact information, including your professional email address. I tell students all the time, you should never use the same email address that you use for personal correspondence as you would with your job. Okay? And in fact, especially the more advanced you get in your careers, don't use your university email as well. Okay? Create a separate professional sounding email address that is purely used for professional reasons. Okay? And I've had a student who's given me a resume and their email address was partyon87@yahoo.com. First of all, don't use Yahoo, it gets spammed all the time. But the other thing too is, right, no, come on. Come on, right? So professional email address. Number two, your career objectives. Think about what's your 1-year goal? Where do you see yourselves 5 years from now, 10 years from now, right? And I might be the last person to give that kind of advice because I never really thought about that long term. But really, it is important for you to kind of have a general picture of what you think you might be doing in a few years, right? Number three, your educational background, which includes degrees, also relevant courses, right? If you're younger, right, you're college, right? Maybe first couple years of college, maybe you're applying for an internship in a field that you want to go into, but you have no job experience, obviously, right? So what you can do on your resume is to highlight courses that you've taken that might apply to that field, right? So that at least shows that you're interested, you're committed, you're somewhat knowledgeable in theory, okay? All right, and honors and scholarships, your GPA, your work experience, other skills, personal interests, awards, etc. And finally, number 6, this is very important. You should always have in mind, I actually would take out the number 2, list 3 people. Try to find 3 people in your life who could possibly write you a strong recommendation, okay? Or at least give a good phone reference if asked to, okay? And these should not be just people who are friends only, right? They should be people who are previous bosses, fellow colleagues, maybe a professor or a graduate student TA, right? Whatever the case may be. Someone in a position of authority who has seen you succeed, right, in some way. So these are all questions that I would like each one of you guys to at some point go through and answer when you're writing your job materials. And just so you know, this is not just for people who are just starting out. I go through this questionnaire once a year at least to update my job and cover letter materials. Even if I'm not looking for a job, there's going to be a lot of things that I've done in a year that I think should go into my resume, right? So I will go through and do a sort of a reassessment of myself each year. Okay. So how much time do we have left? Okay, all right. So then, okay, that's good to know. So in your handout then, I'm not going to talk about it. What I've done is I've given you 2 examples of job materials. Number 1 is a resume, a sample resume of a college student, and then on the back is a sample cover letter, okay? And what I would really like you guys to do is when you're writing your job materials, it's really, really important to see other examples of, very, very good examples. And the best resource for you is, I think, your university or a local university's Career Center website. Right? I actually got both of these from the Northwestern Career Service Center website. That's always the first resource I look towards when I'm looking for job materials for my students, because they're usually very, very edited, very, very revised job materials from students, right? From college students or recently graduated students. And there's a lot of variety in what they look like, but they're all good, right? They all have been vetted, and they all do a very, very good job of showcasing each student's or former student's best abilities and skills, right? So I think that's a really, really good resource for you guys. Always try to check out your institution's career services website. They usually have samples, like PDFs, of cover letters and resumes. So. And then just a quick word about cover letters, because I don't have time to go into it. When you're creating a cover letter is basically an introductory letter. A lot of times you're not going to need one, but it's good to have one on the ready just in case. This is something that you would usually submit to an employer together with your resume to kind of introduce yourself, explain how you found out about the job, right? Whether someone told you or you found it on LinkedIn or something. And then you talk a little bit about maybe your 2 best qualities that you haven't really been able to showcase on your resume, right? So this is where you go into a little bit more detail, and then you close and you say thank you, thank you so much for this opportunity. I look forward to hearing from you soon, and then you sign off, right? It's again just like the resume. It's not a creative document. It's a very, very closed, fixed genre format where it's like usually 1 page, usually 3 to 4 paragraphs. And the language is very, very similar in each cover letter. You just kind of tweak the stuff that's relevant to you, right? So I've included an example of this in the back of your packet. Okay, so I'm all done there.